Hey, what's up, guys? UFC fighter Charles Boston Strong Rosa. I just had a great show with Matt Rosenthal on Digging In on the podcast. Everybody tune in. You can learn a little bit of hard work, dedication, and discipline, and what it means to be a professional athlete and fight in the UFC.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Awesome guest today. I think for me, this is the first time that I have a professional athlete on the show. And, while that's exciting, and as I'm about to introduce you to him, I want you to know that the reason that I have him on is I know him personally now, and his story is so inspirational and it's so motivational that, every time I talk to him, I'm fired up. And so for me to be able to bring to you guys the value of a professional athlete, as you can see, he's a UFC fighter. He'll tell you his story and his background, but the things he's overcome in his life and the tragedies, the triumphs, the entire story, they should make a movie. I'm telling you, maybe they will someday. So with that all being said, I want to introduce you to Charles Rosa. Charles, welcome to the show.
Man, happy to be on. Awesome to be on the show, and look forward to telling you some of my life, and hope to be able to motivate some people and inspire some people.
And your story is it's crazy. I know it, so I can't wait to hear you tell everybody else. So look, we know you're in the UFC. We know that you've done some amazing things, and frankly, you have a lot of runway ahead of you, and you're a champion, and it's fun to watch what you're doing and where you're going. Let's not start there. Let's lead into that. So take everybody back to when you were a kid, kind of like who you were, how your life was, and just bring us on the journey that led you to where you're at. And I'll probably stop you here and there and ask you some questions, but I'll try not to stop you too much.
I'll bring you way back.
All right, go ahead.
I'll bring you way back. I grew up in a large Italian family, 6 brothers and sisters total. My parents are together, still together. I grew up in the suburbs of Boston. I grew up in Peabody, Massachusetts, which is 10 minutes north of Boston. So, grew up, playing hockey, triathlete. So I was always into sports. My older brothers played sports. My younger brothers played sports. So, my dad, one of the things, he was almost like a military type of dad. He wasn't in the military, but if I was just so you can understand how my pops was, if we were ever watching TV, which we weren't really allowed to, during commercial breaks, we're doing push-ups and sit-ups if we want to watch things. He's he doesn't.
No kidding.
He's very always keeping busy, always working. And that's why it's tough growing up in Boston, because in the fall you're raking leaves, in the winter you're shoveling snow, in the spring you're pulling weeds and taking care of the garden, and in the summer is usually the time you're off of school, but that's the time you're not allowed to be in the house because there ain't no AC. So you know what I'm saying? It's 100 degrees in there, so you're just outside. But that's how I grew up. My dad, always, he was a good dad, but he was tough. So he always with my older brothers, he'd always have us, he never really cared about getting the best grades, but he cared that we tried the hardest. So if he ever saw that there was a lack of effort in a game, he never cared if we scored the most goals, but he cared that we gave it 100% effort. So this is something good in morals that I feel that's important for anybody, is to develop things like this at a young age. And just because you don't have them doesn't mean you can't develop them. But for me, personally, I was fortunate enough to have a dad like I did, to be able to put that hard work in that at an early age of never giving up no matter how bad things get. So that was something that was instilled in me.
That's an amazing message. Amazing. Hang on one sec. There he is.
Hey, what's up?
There's Dad right there. Dad, move to your left.
What's up, Dad?
Little surprise. So Chucky, we just say to me, Charles, what you just said to everybody. Say it again to your dad.
Did he hear what I said?
He didn't hear you, man. He was sitting in the waiting room.
Oh no, I basically told him how literally the first thing we started talking about that is how you instilled is to me, Dominic and Vincent, and basically all my my siblings, is that when we grew up, he didn't always care about how many goals I scored or getting the straight A's, but that we tried hard and we never gave up. So that was something that I was fortunate enough to have instilled in me as a kid, because not everybody, those are things you can develop in life, but they're not things you're necessarily that everybody gets. Some people have all different parents, so that's something I was fortunate about. And then I told them about how if we were able to be in the house and watching TV, or which never ever really happened. That in between commercials, we'd have to stay busy, so we'd have to be doing push-ups or sit-ups during commercial breaks. So these are things that they seem like little small things, but these are type of things that in life that if over time, this is my entire childhood. These are things that they slowly add up. So when I get to the stage that I'm at in the UFC, and that moment in the fight where you want to quit or you want to give up, or it's the little things that make a big difference, and it's an accumulation of all the little things added up over time that I think make a big difference. So I think that's also comes down to habits and just every day, just routine, doing it, and even the days you want to do things.
Yeah. Chucky, listen, I thank you for coming, for just popping in for a second. And I thought this would be interesting because I didn't expect him to go right into talking about you. That was the first thing he started talking about. But when you have somebody like Charles who's a champion, and you for the people that are going to watch this show that are looking to be inspired and motivated and look at him as a role model, it does go back to like how he grew up. And when he tells this story, it's kind of cool to have you here, to be able to maybe even share for a second your perspective on what it was like when he was a kid. Like, was he a tough little kid like he is now?
Yeah, he was tough. He was not in stature wise, wasn't the biggest guy on the team, or even when we used to have boxing matches, but he was tough as nails, and he would never quit, and he and now he's fighting, he's competing with and winning, and never been out of a fight. He's competing with the best guys on the planet we live on, and he's overcome a lot of different things. He lost his two older brothers as heroes to substance misuse, and he's overcome that. And if I had to use one word, the only thing we're not born with a lot of talents, or at least I'm not, but I would like to think that I have the discipline. I show up every day, and that's what I try to tell my boys. And I do have a daughter as well that you gotta show up every day, and nothing comes easy. And if you're persistent enough, I think for the most part, one of my favorite quotes, I love quotes, is you make your own luck. And so that's I'll leave it at that. I don't want to be too long-winded.
That's so awesome that you said that. I read this somewhere once. Luck is a combination of your ability to recognize opportunity and to take action. It's not really a luck. Like you're prepared. Right. Yeah. You see it and you do something about it. Is that really luck? It's like, no, right. It's you did it. You created it.
It's like growing a garden. It's even like Charles comes out on my boys all used to come out in the clam flats with me in the wintertime. It can be, to me, it's nothing, but like people, it can be, below zero. You dig in for clams in the mud, and people say, well, geez, how'd you do that? How'd you get them? And it's like, well, they're not jumping out of the mud. You got to get out there and you got to make it happen. They're not jumping out of the mud into your bucket. So, they grow up. I don't, I try to keep them to have a little bit of an edge, but when they come to hurdles, that they'll be able to move on. A lot of people that have a lot of talents, things have come easy to them, in life. And I think that part of the reason that Charles has been able to overcome some of his major obstacles is because of the mindset, is that you can do it.
You didn't disappoint, because you came on here. I hadn't spoken to you, but I know Charles's mindset, and I'm like, this has got to be coming from somewhere. He didn't, and I see it. I mean, it's like talking to him as like talking to you. It's the same thing. So it's very special, because not everybody, and I think very few people, are fortunate enough to have parents or a parent that has that type of persistence with that belief system. And this is what the outcome is. You get somebody who's a champion.
Well, he's paved his own way. I know he's it's a lot of work. I don't think a lot of people, and I'm not going to get into a big sermon about it, understand what's involved, to get to that level. He's not just a local tough guy. I'm not trying to put him on a pedestal either, but people don't understand the diet, the getting up at 4 in the morning, the mornings, the evenings, everything that goes, you're training when you're hurt, there's a lot that goes into it, and he's fighting guys that are doing the same thing he is, and it's a tough racket, but he's tough. He's tough as nails, and he also does a lot of good things too. He works with some of the charities and stuff, and I think too. I think there's a quote, something like that. You gotta give it away to keep it, type of a thing. Where if you do good things, I don't. You don't do them to have good things happen, but I believe that comes full circle. And
it does. Givers get.
Yeah.
If people who give, naturally things just find their way to you.
Yeah.
But you got to be doing it from the right place, not because
right.
you're looking for something.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I don't want to take up all of his time, but I'm really appreciative that you came on. This was phenomenal.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Charles, hopefully you didn't mind.
No, it's perfect. Thanks, Pops. It was good to talk. I didn't get to talk to him today. The last time I saw my dad, I was just in Boston 3 days ago, and I woke up before he drove me two things. Before he drove me to the airport, 4 a.m., he goes and jumps in the ocean. It's freezing out. I mean, it wasn't that. It was like 50 degrees. That's pretty cold from being from Florida. And then he's on the rowing machine at 4 o'clock. And I go see my grandma. I come back like an hour later. He's still in the rowing machine. I'm like, what?
Oh my God!
Like he's a beast, man. So
Charles didn't know you were coming on, and I've never done this before in any of my shows, so it's kind of fun. It's kind of cool. So, Chucky, thanks again.
Oh, thank you very much, and make it a great rest of your week. And God bless you guys.
Awesome.
Hoping something good comes out of it, and I'm sure it will.
Of course it will. We're going to help people.
Amen.
That's it.
Catch you later.
Yeah.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah.
All right.
That's my
so
pops. So you get a better
fun.
understanding, I think, right there. I think that describes like a lot of my, how I was raised. Like you can see right there, it's just a mindset. It's instantly like
That's powerful.
luckily it's something I was born with. Some people are born with talent and things, and they have things like I mean I can't do a backflip, I can't run a 4.40. You know what I'm saying? I can't jump I can't dunk, but I can compete with people that can. So.
All right, bring me back. So you were telling me about how it was when you were growing up with your dad. You were a kid, and so he just filled in some of the blanks. So just kind of take us through the story.
Yeah. So, I grew up, and I think a lot of my first fights, because I grew up with two older brothers. So my childhood was, I would say, like 50% of my day was me getting chased around by my older brothers, trying not to get my ass whooped. You know what I'm saying? So like I was constantly fighting. Then their friends would come over. We had a full-size trampoline. So my friends would come over, my older brother Dominic's friends would come over, my brother Vincent's friends would come over, and we'd all have like 3 different age groups of kids, 3 or 4 years apart, and we'd have like trampoline fights. Like basically we put 2 people on the trampoline, first one off, like there's a champion every time. So big full-size trampoline, we just fight. And like, obviously I'm the littlest out of all of them. I matured a little bit late, so I was little, so I'd have to always be scrapping, and we'd just be making up moves like headlocks, and stuff like that. We had no idea what we were doing, but we were fighting. And then my dad, sometimes we get we all played hockey. A lot of us were hockey players. Like my older brothers played hockey. I played hockey. We get we called it locker boxing. And we would, after practice or even just sometimes on the trampoline, we get the helmet from the hockey. You can imagine like the helmet with the cage, and we get the gloves from your hockey gloves, which are basically like boxing gloves, just a little shaped differently. And we just go at it. So even though it's no formal training, like nobody's teaching us how to throw a punch and nobody's teaching us how to do a guillotine or arm bar, I mean, those are fights, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I'm fighting for my life, like against bigger, stronger guys. So that's kind of how, I think I got into, I was more of a natural at it once the time came, but just kind of bringing you through my childhood. So that's kind of how I grew up. I grew up, older brothers, younger sister. My older brothers were babies, so I was always taking care of them. Like, as a kid, I was 10 years older than my little brother Lucas, who's actually he's 14-0 right now, amateur. So he's the next wave of guys that hopefully make it to the top, and he just won his first championship. So fighting family, but grew up taking care of my little brothers. Running around for my older brothers all day, just family, and my dad definitely had the house in order, but. There was a lot of things like where I grew up at the time in Boston. There was a lot of like it was tough. I mean, I didn't grow up. I wouldn't say in the ghetto, like have the story. I grew up in the ghetto, but I grew up, in a neighborhood, a tough neighborhood. So, you didn't get to, those neighborhoods where kids would steal your bike. They would try to punk you, take things from you. So that's one thing I learned from my brothers is never let anybody punk you or disrespect you. I remember. So that's like, something that you know, it always kind of gave me a certain attitude. Like I just, you know, I think I still carry it with me today, and it allows me to fight and it makes me tough. But over the time frame of just, you know, growing up like that, as you get older, things like, you know, drugs come along and stuff like that. And in that neighborhood at the time, there was like was prescription Oxycontin and pills like that. And, you know, obviously like back then marijuana wasn't illegal. So that was like, you know, a lot of stuff like that going on. And, you know, my older brothers got, you know, hooked on the Oxycontin and the pain pills. So after the time went by, you know, like I started to see, you know, that play an effect in the lives. So I started to be around tough situations. You know, you know, got into some tough things as a young kid and at a young age. And when I was 17, and the following year when I was 18, I lost my two older brothers, Dominic and Vincent, to, you know, accidental drug overdoses. And you know, that was like
that happened like in the same
consecutive years. Yeah. First, my brother Vincent, he wasn't as big on like the hard drugs. Like he mostly would just like smoke weed and drink with his friends. But he got his wisdom teeth got infected, and he was supposed to get his wisdom teeth taken out, and like he ended up, it was giving him so much pain that he traded some weed for a fentanyl patch. At the time, nobody knew what that was. He ate the whole thing, and that's how he passed away. We found out is he traded some, you know, for that. And then my older brother Dominic was pretty much doing pain pills for the last, you know, years. And I think after losing my brother Vincent, who was his younger brother, he was older than me but younger than Dominic, he kind of just felt like just probably had a really tough time with it, and just got continuously worse, you know, pretty much self-medicating himself with drugs, and until I lost him too. And I got really close to him in that year that I lost him. So that for me,
you were 17?
Yeah, I was 17. So I was a junior in high school and then a senior in high school. That's a time of your life, like where you have the most friends, you have all these people around you, and it was devastating. It really was devastating, and I didn't know how to take it. So mentally, it was very tough for me, and I just remember, not to get like morbid, but I had to literally carry both their coffins down in the church down the aisle, and it's like, dude, like those are things that people, they ask me like, oh, like, you know, like, you're such a nice kid, but you have that switch when you go and fight. Like I'm willing to fight to the death, but those are the type of things that, you know, I think allow me to go to that next place, that give me, you know, if you talk to any fighter, any fighter will have a story, you know, whether it's their, you know, they grew up with, you know, they were a foster kid, or they had this, like this, you're rarely going to find a really good fighter that doesn't have some really interesting story. But for me, that's really what I think gives me the fuel to my fire. So that's what makes
you
me.
So you were the oldest brother, you said?
Middle. I was the middle. Now I'm the middle. Okay. So I went from being, and my younger brothers, Lucas and Francis, they're identical twin boys. They were babies. So like I was like the youngest brother. Like my older brothers like didn't really interact with them much because they're babies, and they're like, you know, 15 years older. So I went from basically being basically the youngest brother for years, and then to being, after I lost him, I went to being the oldest brother. And that's, you know, I take a lot of pride in helping my brother Lucas and stuff now, and I love having him down here. So
when that was happening, thank you for sharing that. I think this might be kind of, I guess, powerful for anybody to hear that might be going through something similar. When that was happening, how did you not let yourself get to a place where you just like kind of like drifted into a bad place, and next thing you know, something's happening to you?
Yeah, that's the difficult part, because that's like when you look at things and things are like they're really bad, you know, like you're like, how things couldn't get any worse. And I remember, I think my uncle Tommy, he's a boxer, Tom the Bomb Rosa. He's a local tough man champion. You know, he never got to take it like to the professional level, but he has over 200 boxing matches, and he's basically like, for me, he's like he's like my big brother, but he's my uncle. He's my dad's brother, the one was my pops' brother, Tommy. And I remember he took me in the room and he said to me, he's like, you know, he goes, Charles, right now, obviously, he was devastated too. It was his godchild, Vincent, that passed away at the time when this happened. And he said, there's going to be times where, he goes, right now, this is the worst you could possibly feel, you know, obviously like nightmare. He goes, but there's going to be times again where we're, you know, eating pizza, where we're laughing, where we're happy. And, you know, Dominic and Vincent wouldn't want you to be upset and wouldn't want you to be down. They want you to move forward, you know, and, you know, make something in your life. Like you're gonna have good times again. This is might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but we're gonna be laughing, eating a piece of pizza, and a year from now at a Boston Bruins game or whatever. Like, and I don't know why, it just kind of brought some type of moment of clarity. It just kind of felt like a little bit of anxiety went away, and he was right. Like, I was just with him last weekend. We were watching the Patriots game at his house, eating a piece of pizza, like happy, and talking about all the times and things that we've done in our lives, and there's always the tough times, but there's always good times. So there's rainy days and there's sunny days, but you just got to know that no matter how bad a rainy day is, that there's going to be sun eventually in the future. So if you always know that, no matter how bad you feel, then eventually you're going to get better. That's something I learned at a young age. And the same with, I use it in my fighting career now as motivation for me. Like, I wake up some days, man, and I feel horrible. Like, I couldn't, my body's sore, I literally, I'm the sorest I've ever been. I have, wrestling practice coming up, and I'm dieting, I'm starving, like all these things. But I said, you know what, this is the sacrifice now that I put in, and the pain I have to feel now, that hopefully it's something that it's going to pay off in the future. And it doesn't always pay off, because I haven't won every single fight in my life. There's fights that I've put in 110% at the camp. I've done everything right, didn't eat a morsel of bad food, like months of dieting, and then I go out and lose a split decision in Mexico City. And I'm like, Yair Rodriguez was one of the guys, I'll never forget that camp. I did everything right, perfect, and I go out and lose a split decision, but I still could look myself in the mirror in the morning knowing that I did everything I could possibly do to win that fight. And so I can move on to the next one and just do it again. And then you go and you win the next fight and you're back on top of the world.
That's an important mindset, because what you're also saying, just in a different way, is you can only control what you can control,
Yes.
right? Which is very little, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
The things that are happening, but what you can control is your reaction to a situation. That the one thing we can control is what we're thinking. Well, most of us can, unless there's something wrong, right?
Yeah,
so you can control your perspective. You can control the way you look at it. You can control how you react to it. That's all in your mind, because that's a choice. And so that's really interesting perspective, because even though those tragedies happened and you had a good support system around you, where you were given good thoughts to think, things to keep you in the right mindset.
Yeah.
You still chose that mindset.
Yeah, that's the thing, is a lot of people, one of the things that I like to look at is all these things, that bad things can happen. I don't know, it sounds kind of crazy, but it's it's almost it's kind of like the X-Men. They have the people that have all these bad things that happen to them, and these tragedies, and they can use their superpowers for something great and to make the world a better place, or they can do the opposite and use it for destruction. So some people, they turn to alcohol, drugs, they become menaces to society, basically, and they just make everything worse and self-sabotage everything in their life. And then some people can take those things and do something great, which I've been fortunate enough to be able to do. I've channeled all this negative, bad, tough things that happened in my life, all this energy, because that's what it is, it's energy, and I've channeled it towards something like fighting, and I've to be able to be something great, and to hopefully inspire people, and to use it for good. I get to go to children's hospitals, bring my championship belts, bring it to kids that are dying from cancer, and maybe give them that little morsel of hope or light to make them be better. Or even kids that are in high school that maybe are starting to experiment with drinking and stuff like that, and then they see someone like me, this kid is just give them some hope to be something better, or just even inspire just a regular person. Hey, there's even guys at work. I worked as a chef for years at a restaurant, and I've had guys in line hey man, I feel like I'm getting a little fat, can you help me with my diet? And I'm hey, do this, this, and this. And if they do them, and it just it's
rewarding. You're having an impact. Charles, so take me to where you actually began to train. Because you're a black belt, right?
Yes, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
So take me through, all right, so you're jumping on a trampoline, you're fighting, you're kicking some ass in your house, but at some point this got serious.
Yep. So basically what happens is, I lose my two older brothers. So my childhood comes up, grew up tough, playing sports, always athlete, triathlete, older brothers, always fighting, growing up as a kid, neighborhood fights, dealing with the death of my older brothers, 17, 18. And then, when I was 18 years old, I got an opportunity, to go to college. So basically I got to see, the guidance counselor, and they're like, what do you want to do? And I said, yeah, I want to play hockey. And they're that's not really something you can do. What do you want to do for school?
Right.
And I'm and I was well, So we found a school, a culinary arts school, Johnson and Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island. So I got to go there. I was able to play college hockey and, get a degree in culinary arts. So that was really fortunate that I was able to do that and, be able to keep, from the most part, do the right thing through college. It was definitely difficult because, there was a lot of drinking and, things involved in, obviously that's a whole, but I was able to get my degree through hard work, you know what I'm saying? So I just, wasn't always get the best grades, but I tried hard and turned in all my work, got a degree in culinary school. And so moving forward from there this is where the story starts of the fighting in my career is, 21 years old, 22 years old now, have a degree in culinary arts, and I'm kind of a little bit lost. Like I, don't really know what I want to do with my life. Kind of anybody when you finish, college, like, all right, well, what now? Like some people take time off. So I had an opportunity, to in Florida to kind of come down here and, work at a restaurant. So I found this restaurant, Cut 432, restaurant I worked at all the way through most of my UFC career. And I found the nicest restaurant I could find. And I said, this is where I want to work. And I remember this is like one of the first ways in life is like also like a lesson that's something that you guys can get from this is like not taking no for an answer. I remember walking into that restaurant the first day and being like, hey, you guys hiring? Like, I want to work here as a chef. They're like, no, we're not, and it was just a lady at the front. I'm like, well, she's like, you can, fill out this or whatever. And I just walked into the restaurant. She's like, excuse me, sir. And I was like, hey, is the chef here? And that guy's like, he's like, yeah, I'm the chef. What's up, dude? What do you want? I'm busy. And I'm like, I wanted to see if you give me an opportunity to work here. I'm looking for a job. He goes, well, what makes you think you're qualified to work here? Like, who are you? And I go, well, I went to Johnson and Wales Culinary School. I graduated, and this is what I love to do. He goes, well, do you have a passion for food and cooking? And I go, well, yeah, I wouldn't have went to culinary school for 4 years if I didn't. And he kind of laughed. He goes, all right, come in tomorrow. And man, the first 3 days they put me on the line, dude. They kicked me off the line every single night. By the first 2 weeks, I was chopping onions because I couldn't do anything. I didn't know anything. It was a nightmare. And I almost wanted to quit. Some days I'm like, man, like, this is embarrassing. Like, I don't know how to do. I can't even cook a piece of salmon. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, but I was humble enough at the time to say, you know what, can you teach me? And I started from the bottom. I literally started basically washing. The first day they made me wash dishes, and then I got to chop onions, and then slowly built my way up until being able to do everything and being able to take guidance from him. And so I was working in the restaurant. I was a chef, and after working at that restaurant for about 6 to 8 months, I just remember feeling like, man, this isn't fulfilling enough for me. Like something is missing. And at the time, I was seeing a therapist that I had set up because, like at the time, like going down there, like I thought it was a good idea to like, I'm never the type of person to ever talk about my problems, but I was able to, get in a therapist and get in a group therapy. And one of the therapists suggested that, as a directive that I find another hobby. Like, what do you want to do? And so she suggested, why don't you go find a boxing gym? Like you said, that's something you've always been interested in. You can get back in shape so you're not just in the restaurant eating all day. Like, you feel – because, like, I just felt like I remember getting that job and being like, this is – like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like, is this really what – this is it? Like, I'm 22 years old. Am I going to do this for the next 20, 30 years and maybe find a girlfriend, get married, and, like, this is it? Like, just show up every day, work 9 to 5 or – well, not even 9 to 5 in a restaurant. It's, like, whatever it is. It's, like, 12 to friggin' 11 at night and, like, 60, 70 hours a week. And I just remember feeling like something's missing. So that's when this is the story started, me being a fighter. At the time, I only had a bicycle. I was living in Delray Beach, Florida, barely able to pay my rent, had no money, basically, like just, having enough to pay my bills through working at the restaurant. Didn't have enough money for a car, nothing. I went to what I thought was a boxing gym, and it was American Top Team in Boca Raton. The head coach was Charles McCarthy. The first day I rode into the gym, this is probably one of the cool stories. They've told it on a couple of like the Ariel Helwani show and ESPN News and a couple podcasts. And walk into the gym, had no idea. I didn't know much about the UFC. Like I knew Royce Gracie in like the first UFC fights, but I didn't know much about anything. And going to the gym, and I'm like, met Charles McCarthy, and he's like, oh yeah, man, you can do the first class for free. See how you like it. We actually have a kickboxing class in 15 minutes if you want to hop in. There's some gloves in the bin over there. And you don't have a mouthpiece or cup, but like you probably won't need it. Just don't, you probably won't be doing too much sparring your first day anyways. So I was like, man, this is what I came here to do. Like I want to box. Like in my head, like I remember having all those locker boxing matches as a kid. So like I was ready to go. And teaching the class at the time was UFC fighter Cole Miller. He was top 10 in the world at the time in my weight class. Had no idea who he was. but I just did his class. So we did the whole class, did the stretches, do the technique. End of the class comes, last 15 minutes. They're like, all right, guys, time for sparring. Everybody partner up. Everyone partners up. I'm the odd man out. So I'm sitting there and I go to Kid Cole. I'm like, Coach Cole. I was like, hey, Coach, do you have someone I can spar with? He's like, no, man, it's your first day. Just watch. Like kind of cocky, like rude to me. And I was like, all right, dude, whatever. Like, and I thought I could beat up everybody in the whole room. Like, I didn't have any idea. Like, honestly, like I was like, I would smash all these guys like in my head because that's how I grew up. Like, always just thinking. But so like so everyone starts sparring and he's just hitting the bag. So like after a minute goes by, I go, hey, what about you? Can I spar with you? And he looks at me like he's hitting the bag, and he looks at me, just looks back and starts hitting the bag. And I was like, he just ignored me. I go, was that a no? And he turns and he goes, you want to spar with me? I said, yeah, I just asked you twice. And he goes, all right, let's go. And we go up and we just start like friggin' boxing. I'm just fighting. I felt like it was a fight. Like I just was like throwing the hardest punches, just fighting for my life basically. The end of it, I just remember like, definitely being like, man, that skinny kid's pretty tough, dude. Like that was a good scrap, and I didn't have a mouth guard or nothing. And I remember Charles McCarthy said he watched it from the window of his office and he's like, what the hell is this kid doing? So the class ends. It was nothing. It wasn't like it got out of hand or nothing. Just like it was a good sparring match. I didn't really know. And then Charles McCarthy, who's still my coach now, comes up to me and he goes, "Hey Charles," he goes, "Yeah, man, he goes, where did you train at? Where did you train at in Boston?" I go, "Oh no, this is my first day. I've never done any type of like boxing really." Like he's like, "You've never trained before?" And I was like, "Well, a couple of times. Like I hit the bag in my house. I had a punching bag." And he's like, And he goes, "Oh man," he goes, "I'm not." He goes, "I'm not just spinning your wheels, but I'm telling you, man, if you stick with this, I think you could be something." I thought he was just saying that so I would sign up and pay the monthly fee. Honestly, I was this guy just trying to get me to sign up. Like, I was like, he's like, "Why don't you come back tomorrow?" He goes, and he goes, "You know that guy you were sparring with, right?" And I go, "No, what do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, that's Cole Miller. He's a top 10 fighter in the UFC, and yeah, I thought you did really well against him." And I was like, dude, and that was a second a light bulb went off. I was like, I went home. I went to Google, whatever's on my computer, and I looked him up, and I saw he had like 15 UFC fights. He was top 10 in the world at the time, and I was like, if this kid is in the UFC, I go, I just don't know everything he knows. If I can learn this stuff, I think I could do it. And that's when the light bulb went off. And every single day, I would wake up 9 o'clock, ride my bike 45 minutes to the gym, train 2 hours, ride my bike home, be lucky to get like a small banana or something because I couldn't afford anything else. Or maybe a half of a sandwich or something. And then I would go to work. I wouldn't actually be able to eat anything because I had no money, so I'd only be able to eat at work because luckily I was a chef, so I could just wait all day to eat. So I would ride my bike to the gym, train for 2 hours, ride my bike home, have like 20 minutes to put my clothes on, ride my bike, work from like 12 to 11 at night, ride my bike home from work. And that was my life 6 to 7 days a week for about 3 years. And throughout that time, I was fighting. I started fighting amateur fights and building up. And I would just basically would call the chef and be like, "Hey, can I have Saturday night off? I have a fight coming up." And luckily, he did some sort of martial arts, and he was, fan of it. And he's like, "Yeah, man, I got you. He goes, you can take Saturday night off, but just be there on Sunday." And the first fight I ever had, actually, I was like, "Hey, if I leave, my fight will be at 7. I'll come back for the rush hour at like 9:30. Hopefully, if my match gets over in time." And he's like, "Nah, don't worry about it. Take it off." But I was willing to go fight and come back to work. Luckily, I didn't have to do that because Saturdays are busy in the restaurant. It ain't easy, and I need my job.
So you were working in the restaurant the whole time?
The whole time, all the way through.
For some reason, I thought I heard you say after 6 months you were like, "Screw this."
No, after 6 months, I thought I was going to say, I didn't want to, I was like, this isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life. I need to find a new hobby. So I told my therapist, I'm like, if this is what my life is like, I'm not happy. Like, this is not what I want my life to be like. Like, I don't feel good. I want to just go back to doing whatever I want to do. Like, I just don't want to do, I don't know.
I got a couple questions. I really didn't want to stop you because you were like, you were flowing there. But so the fact that you were 22, you started speaking to somebody about how you were feeling.
Yep, therapist,
so what sparked you to, what, you had never done that before. Did you just decide hey, I just need to speak to somebody?
No, honestly, when I first moved to South Florida, I kind of moved down there because I started in college. I was starting to get problems with drinking and, just abuse, you know what I'm saying? Of like stuff like that. And I just kind of got to that point where basically I moved to Florida and I needed to change my life. I just knew, and I basically got it. One of the reasons I went down there was to go to this therapy group that would just help me. And I'm not a person that ever would tell anybody my problems or anything like that. Like I was really against it, but my family and people that my uncle Tommy especially they were very adamant about me getting help and doing the right thing. That I just kind of felt like, you know what, I need to do the right thing. Like I need to listen to them and take the advice, and I did. And like honestly, I think that therapist saved my life. Like I still talk to her sometimes and teach her kids boxing and stuff, but I feel like that's one thing that I think like if anybody gets out of this is that like I was always like taught like you don't tell anybody or your problems and stuff like that. But I think it's important that people, if you have issues in your life or things like that, that you have somebody to speak to. And it doesn't have to even whether it's a close friend, but sometimes it's better just to have somebody that has no like real ties to you, so you can work through your problems and get an outside point of view because. I think it's really important. Like, there's a lot of people that have like, fortunately for me, I never felt like this, but there's like a lot of people that have like suicide. I've lost so many friends and stuff to drug overdoses and stuff like that. And a lot of it stems from, it's not really the people that have drug problems. It's not their problems. Isn't the drugs, it's their behaviors. Like they're stealing all day. They're
Yeah,
lying.
that's so true.
They're doing what they got to do. It's not that they're just doing the drugs. The drugs is only part of the problem. So
For sure.
if you can fix all those internal issues and your behaviors and start doing the right thing, and that's something I changed about myself. Like I changed my behaviors. I started doing the right thing all the time, and even when nobody's watching. And that's like I think when it's important is to make this is to do the right thing when nobody's watching. And that's the same goes for training. Like I'm not just hitting the bag hard when the coach is yelling at me to watch. I'm hitting the bag hard when I'm by myself, at night at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night when everybody else is at the club partying. I'm in my little gym in my basement hitting the bag to music as hard as I can because I'm chasing something. So
that's a valuable lesson right there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people. I think I've read about Kobe Bryant and maybe Michael Jordan, but that's a common thing that you just said among successful athletes, that it's what you do when nobody's watching.
Yes.
That's your standards. That's your who you are, your behaviors, your values. Like, and like that is the difference between being average and being
great,
exceptional.
Yep.
You touched on something, and I was kind of putting some things together, and you said it actually. So I'm almost hearing like that by the fact that you spoke to that person and that person gave you some advice and you decided to do something with it. Literally, that was the catalyst for everything else that happened after that. Everything you've got. If you didn't go to speak to that person, you might not be doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, and that's where I think one of the best things and the message that I like to give is to be able to take advice and from people like if someone tells you something, like you got to be open-minded. And that's the reason I was able to become a good mixed martial artist is open-mindedness. Like the first day I went in the gym, like I didn't know, I just went at it with the guy, but I was humble enough to be able to say I don't know what this guy knows, and I'm willing to learn it, and I'm willing to be open-minded even though it goes against my instincts and a lot of things. That's the thing, is like I'm always was growing up like trusting my instincts and going like off of what I think, but you can't think that you know everything. There's no way. You need people around you to help build you up and like coaches and stuff like that. So, but even we were talking about before how you're doing physical training, like there's no way you could train yourself to be in as good shape as somebody that's a professional that does it for a living and could help you. So these are things that, I think the open-mindedness, and that's where jiu-jitsu came into my life too, is like being able to be disciplined enough to get the black belt and stuff like that in jiu-jitsu. It's like, it comes down to, discipline. It's not just hard work. Like people think, oh, it's just like work really hard. No, it's discipline. Like you have to be able to be disciplined, open-minded. You got to be able to help people. You got to be able to get help. You got to be able to do it all. It can't just be like, all right, I'm just going to grind every day as hard as I can. You ain't going to get anywhere. You're just going to go in circles, basically. Just might as well run in circles.
For
sure. You got somebody that can build you up and to do that. And I think that's an important thing for fighters, because I've talked to them, even my buddy Scrappy, we're going to dinner with tonight. I've seen so many fighters from other countries. I trained an American top team for 10 years. Seen fighters from every country in the world: Japan, Russia, Germany, China, Brazil, everywhere. Some of the most talented guys on the planet come in, and you never see them again. And some of them are living out of their car, some of these places, and they're making all these sacrifices. But it's the one that are disciplined enough to take instruction, to work hard, take instruction, be disciplined, and do all the right things, not just some of the right things. Like this, I said that to Dustin Lampros, who, like I said, he's like my young Jedi in training. And I told him this at one point. I go, when I met him, he was a 2-5 amateur living out of his car, and I let him stay at my house. And I said, he's like, I really want this, and he dedicated so much of his time. And I go, listen, man, I go, there was sometimes maybe he wouldn't be eating the right thing. He would do this. I go, don't waste your time. I go, if you want to do this for fun as a hobby, then do it. I'm cool. Like, cool. I'll train with you, do whatever. You take some fights sometimes to have some fun. You know what I'm saying? But if you're really trying to become a UFC fighter, you're chasing a dream to be great. I go, you need to do everything right. Not just some things. There's no shortcuts. Don't waste your time. I go, don't waste my time. Don't waste everybody's time. I go, it's all or nothing, man. It's not like you're just going to do some of the things right. And that's the difference, man. I've seen guys that have the talent, that have the skills, they got the speed, they got the quickness, they got the age, the youth, like everything. But then maybe they're just undisciplined in their weight. They just eat whatever they want. And you're like, well, dude.
And it
like,
doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So
it doesn't work.
This is just kind of, that's the thing is that's the thing that people don't understand that we touched on earlier is like, you got to be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. And that's what I've been fortunate enough to do. And that's the message I try to give to other guys.
So we talked about, so now we're 40 minutes in, we've talked about your mindset, how you came up, where you come from. We heard from your dad. We talked your circumstances, like you've gone through it all. And so now, like, okay, you went, and so you took some steps from that point where you were going to that gym. They saw some potential in you.
Yeah.
Now there's the rest of the story, which brings us to look where you are now. Right. So fill it in, man, because you're doing some pretty amazing things right now.
Yeah, this is where the story gets great, and it's the 3 years that kind of get swept under the rug. A lot of me, riding my bike to the gym every day, having no money, like living, basically
paying your dues.
Eating bananas, white bread, and eggs because that's all I could afford. Like my dessert was orange juice. You know what I'm saying? Like that's 3 years of that, and I didn't, but didn't get to go to Chipotle and all these places to get these good meals. I had to eat what I could afford, but I did through all that, and I started fighting amateur. I asked my coach every day. He made me wait a year, luckily, to fight, so I had the skills and not just the toughness. And I became the #1 amateur in the country. I fought 20 fights, or won 20 fights as an amateur, and became
in the first year.
Year and a half, 2 years. Yeah, it took me 2 years. I fought 20 fights in 2 years, so basically fight every month. And I won six championships, a few kickboxing world titles as an amateur, and so at that time I was the #1 prospect in the country, to become a professional fighter. So then I turned professional. And
wait, back up, right? Pause right there for a second. In order to go to make that transition, so in that year and a half, you weren't just going to the gym and learning just from one way, right? You were also studying martial arts.
And I was working full time. So
full-time work, martial arts training though, right? Separately from going to the gym and boxing, right?
Yeah, it was everything. Yeah, I was doing well. And I said, because I said I was going to I thought it was a boxing gym, but it wasn't. It was a mixed martial arts gym.
Okay.
So I went from going to the boxing class to being like, hey, you should do the jiu-jitsu class tomorrow. And like I go in and I go with this 125-pound kid wearing glasses, like thought he was a little dork, just taps me out with a triangle. And I was like, dude, what the hell? I'm like, this guy definitely knows something that I don't know, because he couldn't beat me in anything, but somehow he just made me tap out and quit. Like, I'm like, there's no way. Like, so I knew I had to learn that. So I started doing all the classes. Like anytime, whatever class was, like the mornings would be jiu-jitsu, boxing, wrestling, alternate. I did them all every single day.
Now, jiu-jitsu is like grappling, right? You're not boxing.
It's basically wrestling with chokes, submission chokes. So you try to.
You got to get somebody to the ground.
Yep, you get some to the ground and you try to choke them out, and that's like my specialty.
So how long did it take you to get a black belt from starting from nothing? You didn't know anything.
I got one of the fastest. I'm one of the fastest Americans to ever receive it. Is 6 years. 6 years. I got my black belt in 6 years, and that's winning multiple, grappling tournaments. North American grappling champion. All over. Did tournaments like every weekend. If I wasn't fighting in the weekend, I was doing grappling tournaments. So. Fortunate enough for me is an important part is I had a good coach, Charles McCarthy, who was a black belt in jiu-jitsu at the time. So to get through the story, though, is like I was an amateur, and you get belts. You go from white belt to blue belt to purple belt, and that's just like little, stepping stones in your career, just kind of like, stones in time, I guess, that you can see where the progression is. And, some people will get to a certain point, but to get to the full point of a black belt, it takes basically 8 years of dedication and discipline and not ever stopping, training through injuries, doing stuff like that. And sometimes it's hard, going there and putting the, karate belt on and listening to the coach when you're winning championship fights, like to go from MMA back into the jiu-jitsu class because you're a student again. And when you're a champion, you get the gold belt around you, you feel like you're the king, but that's where it comes full circle. And if you're able to go back to learning, and you're that's a real true mixed martial artist. The definition of it is being able to mix it up and to be disciplined. And
So
and
how
that's
were you winning those fights when you were
so
really
it's
just you were just learning the martial arts, and you were learning how to do things like, I guess, within like a system of a right way to do them,
yeah,
but not like street fighting,
dude.
right?
It's a weird thing. That's the thing about fighting, and there's guys like Kimbo Slice that, he didn't have any martial arts experience. Like Kimbo Slice is one of my good friends, and for those who don't know, he's notoriously one of the greatest fighters and street fighters ever. He had no actual training experience, but he was beating UFC good fighters up. And sometimes it's an if factor. It's like something that you're born with. You
Like
have this
instinctual.
toughness. It's just like you can fight, and that's the one sport. Like you could never take a guy off the street and put him in an NFL game and have him run a route and just like catch.
Right.
Like he doesn't.
Right.
It's just there's too many things. Or go play tennis and just like be able to beat like Rafael Nadal, like, or go golf and just be able to beat Tiger Woods. Like it doesn't happen. But in fighting is the one time it does happen, because there's the something inside you, like the eye of the tiger, whatever you
Mental
want to call it,
toughness.
like that does it. But so that's just like basically, I think it's all the values of growing up as a kid, like all those matches I had in the trampoline, all the hockey fights I've been in, all the the sprints I had to do in lacrosse, and like all these things add up. But to kind of fast forward through the story, so I was the #1 amateur in the country. I transitioned from that to being a professional. So at that time, when I turned professional, I walked into work one day, and the chef said to me, "Hey, Charles, I want to talk to you." And I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "I want to give you a promotion. I want to make you the sous chef of the restaurant. You'll be working a little bit more. We're gonna pay you double. I really want you." And I go,
Wow.
"Man, honestly, it was the same day that they gave me my first professional fight." I go,
How
it's
does
very
that work,
strange.
though? How do you flip to be a professional? You don't just
You sign a fight. Like you have to have 4 amateur fights. I had 20, and you can
so
go.
they're watching you, like recruiting you, like
No, so this isn't the UFC. This is just professional. So anybody could take
okay, not UFC.
anybody could take a professional fight. If you wanted to, you could probably take a professional fight. You know what I'm saying? Like you could sign a fight against a guy. They'll pay you like $300, and you'll go fight.
Yeah.
You have to get your licensing, but anybody can get licensed as long as you can pass
Okay.
the exam. So being a professional fighter isn't even anybody can do it. Honestly, like anybody tuning in right now could probably go take a professional fight. You probably get smashed, but like it depends who you fight though. You could so. I thought I signed pro, and when I went to the restaurant, the guy asked me to take a full-time salary as a sous chef, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm actually was gonna talk to you about maybe working less and chasing my dream of being a professional fighter." And he's like, "Yeah, man." He goes, "You know what? I'm all for it." He goes, "So I'll put you on part-time. You tell me the days a week you want to work. I see how hard you work. I respect you, and I want the best for you. So it's awesome that you're chasing your dream." So luckily for me, my chef Tony Pizzo from Cut 432 gave me that opportunity to be able to do what I want to do and to make my own schedule. So now it's on. Like I'm training like a professional athlete now. I'm only working part-time just to pay the bills, because you don't get money as a professional fighter. Like until you make the UFC, you don't make more than $1,000 a fight if you're lucky. So you fight 5 or 6 times a year. So within 18 months of turning pro and working part-time, still working 3 or 4 days a week, I went 9-0 with all first-round finishes. So in 18 months, I won 9 fights throughout the United States, most of them in Providence, Rhode Island, a couple in Miami, a couple, throughout in the United States. And then I was 9-0, and I was the #1. I went from being the #1 amateur in the country to being the #1 professional prospect in the country, unsigned by the UFC.
Wow.
And I got a call to fight the #9 guy in the world, Dennis Seaver, in Stockholm, Sweden, on 5 days' notice. So at this time, I'm 178 pounds. I have to fight at 145 pounds in 5 days, and I went and fought one of the top 10 guys on the planet. Actually, he was the #1 European fighter in the world at the time, and I went to fight him in his hometown. And man, it was a war. Like I didn't end up winning the fight. It went to decision. It was my first loss in my career ever, so I was devastated. But I was supposed to make $10,000 that fight. But it was such a good fight. I ended up getting performance of the night and getting a $50,000 bonus from Dana White.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I went from having about $4,000 in my bank account, which, was pretty much, to having a check of $60,000 from the fight, even though I didn't win, was more money than I've ever seen. So I remember I went to the bank and I was like, "I want to cash this check." They're like,
You
"Want to
can't
make a
cash
bank
that.
account?" I'm like, "No, I want this. I want to see what this money looks like." And it was just, I
That's
took
funny.
the money out for a day, played with it, put it back in the bank, but it was just really funny, just an interesting experience. But, So that's kind of how I got my UFC contract. I was ready on short notice, and I went against the top guy. He ended up fighting Conor McGregor at the next fight, so it was pretty interesting. The guy Dennis Seaver he fought Conor McGregor right after that fight, and so you can see the level that it's at. It's the highest level. It's not like what I'm saying.
How long was that journey? Right. So now, from the time you walked into that gym to the time where you had that fight, now where you're so how many years went by?
4 years, 2 years amateur, almost 2 years as a professional, and now I've been in the UFC for eight or 9 years. So now I've had 14.
So in those 4 years that happened, and so now I know you bring up some good points. So how do you fight the guy like Conor McGregor? Everybody knows, right? So it's easy to identify. So how do you fight him? How does it work? How do they know who you're fighting? And how do you know what's like? How do you keep moving up? How does that work?
You keep winning, and that's simple as that. Like, there's world rankings. So at the time when I got my first UFC fight, I may be ranked, top 100 in the world if I'm lucky. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm 9-0, all undefeated, but I haven't fought anybody. So then you go fight a guy like Dennis Seaver, who's number 8 in the planet Earth. Like, in that and the whole world, and Japan, Russia, all these countries. It's not just like the United States. Like, you're fighting the toughest guy from Florida. Like, you're fighting the toughest guy on the planet Earth. I fought the number 1 guy from Europe. So I fought in all of the entire continent of Europe. I fought the toughest guy at the time. You know what I'm saying? Who was Dennis Seaver.
So how do you get that fight? That was the one where they came to you.
Yeah, they called me. They called my manager. I had my manager, Charles McCarthy, who was the guy that the day that I walked into the boxing gym, and he told me, I'm not just spinning your wheels, man. You got something special here. That's the guy. He was managing me at the time, and he goes, hey, I got a call from the Dana White and the UFC, and they want you to fight in 5 days. And dude, it's a good opportunity. You're going to make more money than you've ever made from doing anything, for fighting. And it's definitely a tough fight for you. I was like a 5-1 underdog, but man, if you go and watch that fight, it's one of the greatest.
I'm going to watch it.
One of the greatest fights in UFC. At the time, it was fight of the year contender, which means like it was one of the best fights of the entire year. The one that beat me was Jose Aldo versus Chad Mendes, which is strange because like when they voted for the month, I won fight of the month, and I won fight of the month over Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes. But then when they did fight of the year, they somehow beat me. So how did I beat them for fight of the month, but I didn't beat them for fight of the year? Does that make sense? It was just, I won fight of the month over their fight. It was in the same month. But then when fight of the year came up at the end of the year, probably because they're both the champions at the time, like they gave them fight of the year. But my point is like I think it was probably one of the best fights, so it was good.
So who right now? So who's number one? Like where if you fought that person and you won, that's it. You're number one. Who's that person now?
There's a champion. The number 1 in the world is Yair Rodriguez, and that was my
in your weight class.
And yeah, is Yair Rodriguez. He's number 1 in the world right now. And I lost a split decision to him in Mexico City, and that's what I talked about earlier. How I could look in the mirror. Like, if you go to Mexico, you better be able to finish the guy. Like, you're not going to get a decision in Mexico. So I went and lost a split decision to Yair Rodriguez in Mexico City. I won a fight after I fought the first UFC fight. I won the next fight. Then I went to Mexico City, which was pay-per-view. It was on the heavyweight championship of the world. There was the 2 fights before that, so it was like basically the co-main event of one of the biggest fights in UFC history. Was the heavyweight championship of the world. You can't get bigger than that. And I was on the right fight before it, and I fought Yair Rodriguez, who was an up-and-coming prospect at the time. And we fought, man, and it was a freaking scrap. It was a great fight. So we ended up getting fight of the night in that fight too, but I lost a split decision, which means it was 3 judges. 2 said he won, 1 said I won. Everyone thought I won, but I'm not in my hometown. I'm not in Boston. I'm in another country, and I'm American. So when I walked out to that fight, I was covered in beer because the fans were pouring beer on me with my American flag like this. My underwear was soaked in beer before I even fought. So it was crazy. But like I said, I don't make excuses. I go in there and I say, hey, man, I did everything I could do and get back, and I won the next fight, got a new UFC contract, and then, not to say long story short, but 15 fights later, I'm still fighting to get that top spot in the UFC to become the champion. So,
So how did you get that opportunity though? To get that fight now? Like, there's a process.
Well, it's like the NFL. Like, if you think of it like the NFL, like if you're one of the best players, basically me fighting as a professional is like me playing in college. So there's scouts, there's people watching, they're watching your film, they're watching your fights, and all of a sudden they say, man, this guy's freaking good. He's running faster than everybody. He's better than the NFL calls, and they said they put him on, as one of the draft prospects, and then hopefully they pick you up. And the UFC is like the NFL, so they want to pick these guys up. And for the UFC, everybody is trying to become a UFC fighter. I would say it's as close to as impossible right now as anything. Like, it's insane, like how how hard it's like basically when you see a basketball player, you probably know tons of kids that were nasty in basketball growing up, but how many of them playing in the NBA? It's like exactly
Zero.
like some of my boys go like dunking, and I'm like, dude, this kid's
Right.
nasty. I couldn't even stop him from doing anything. But there's levels to it, and luckily I was at that highest level, and I was able to get that opportunity to shine and continue to do so. And then I'm still here now, man. I've been in the UFC for almost 9 years now, and had some of the best fights, and win one, lose one, and it's tough, but it's just it's a game of inches, and that's why these little things make a big difference. And that's the thing that it's just like these fights, like the split decision fights, like the things like that, like that's where it comes down to, is the nitty gritty of it, is the hard work. Like, what are you doing more than your opponent? And that's what I wake up every morning and I think of, like, oh, what's my opponent doing? Am I working harder than him? I just do what I can do. And, you train hard, you surround yourself with good people, and you continue to work hard. And, man, that's what I do. And then I try to help other people. I got my little brother, Lucas Rosa. He's up and coming prospect. I help, Dustin Scrappy. And, he's like my young Jedi in training. And I got all, these guys that I help, and it comes full circle. There's people that help me, and then I help them, and we give each other the blueprint, and we try to make it better. So, like, I followed the blueprint of my coach, Charles McCarthy. I'm doing better than him. Hopefully I can still get a chance to win that world title. But next in line is Scrappy, and below him is my brother
The guys
Lucas.
you're mentoring.
I have Scrappy. Like I said, I met Scrappy. He was a 2-5 amateur, dude. 2-5. He won 2 fights out of 7 as an amateur fighter, and now I can't even remember. He's 8-0 with all finishes. The kid's a number top prospect.
I saw him at the gym 2 weeks ago on a Saturday. He walked in with this big belt, man.
He's a champion.
Hell,
Yeah,
it's pretty heavy. I'm like,
yeah. I mean, now he's a world champion. As
Yeah.
a professional, and he's not the UFC champion yet, but hopefully that's next. So I just keep helping people, and I just actually have my roommate Daniel Marcos just got a UFC contract from Dana White last weekend. I don't know if you saw. I was in Vegas, and
I saw, yeah,
on the Contender Show. He
Yep.
just got a UFC contract, and I've been helping him and training him. So I obviously I focus on my own career to be great, but I do enjoy helping people, and that's where I think what my dad mentioned earlier. It's like, honestly, it helps me probably even more than it helps them, helping people, because if you give, like, you don't help people to get stuff back in return. Like, I'm going to give this guy this, so hopefully he gives me this back. Like, you do it, but I believe, like, not to get like all crazies, but like I really believe in karma, man. You do the right thing and you help people. It might not be sudden, it might not be right away, it might be years later, but it always comes back full circle, and I truly believe that. So that's something, that a motto that I live by, and that if you continue to do the right thing, like my dad said, like, you make your own luck. And like I kind of live and die by. Like, I feel like if you work hard, like people say, like, I got like this arm bar, I got win this fight, the guy was beating the crap out of me, and I submit him and break his arm, and they're like, oh, I was kind of lucky. I'm like, you have no idea how many times I've done that arm bar. I must have done it 10,000 times in my life. So, and that's it. But in between there, one thing that I kind of went through my whole UFC career to where I'm at now, but I know we're getting shorter on time, but just like one thing that I think is probably the most inspirational part of my story that I think anybody can listen to and that can help is, halfway through my UFC career, I was on my second UFC contract. I was training for a fight in Japan, and I don't know if, like, why things happen for a reason, but I went all the way to Japan. My neck was killing me the whole camp, but I just toughed through it and decided to take the fight. I noticed I was having atrophy in my upper body. My arms were weaker, but I was stupid enough to go to Japan and take the fight anyways. And I didn't get any MRIs at that point or nothing, but I went to the fight, and I knew I was hurt, but I didn't care. Like, fighters fight, and that's what I was going to do. And for some reason, I went to Japan, and my opponent fell off the scale because he missed weight, and he was too, like, out of it. He must have been too dehydrated, fell off the scale, and they canceled the fight because he was too dehydrated. Luckily, they still took care of me and paid me whatever, but I went home. And I'm like, man, I should probably get some MRIs in my neck. It's been hurting me. And, man, it was a blessing in disguise. I had such a severely herniated disc and a broken neck that that they said if I even got hit once too hard, like, I could have died. So,
wow.
But like, I kind of wonder, I'm like, how come that the chances of a UFC fight getting canceled like that, like, probably maybe 1 in 300 or 1 in, so that happened. But so basically, the whole part of the story is the doctor told me, I was like, yeah, man, you need to get this neck surgery, and unfortunately, like, you're gonna keep having atrophy if you don't get it fixed, and you won't be able to fight again. He goes, it's improbable you'll ever fight again. And that moment, I remember the doctor taking us into an office with my parents in there, and when he told me the news about my herniated disc and how it was he goes, it's improbable you'll ever fight again, and my heart sunk, dude. It dropped. Like all the years of hard work and everything I went through, he's telling me that I can't do what I love to do, and I worked my whole life to finally get to this point where I'm finally able to make a living for myself. Like all those years of fighting amateur for free, all those pro fights where I made like $200, all those hard work and blood, sweat, and tears I put in the gym to be finally make it to where I have a chance to become great, to be able to be told like you can't do it anymore or it's improbable. And I looked at my parents, and it was the first time I ever seen a look on my dad's face where he didn't have some type of answer for me, and my mom just was basically almost like in tears. And I said to the doctor, I tried to think about what I could do because the way I grew up, I always find a solution, whether it's you got to do what you got to do, say what you got to say, get out of trouble in school, whatever. I thought of something that I could say, and I said to the doctor, I said, is it improbable or impossible? And he like kind of looked down at his notepad and he looked at me. He says, it's improbable. It's less than a 1% chance. And I was like, well, you know what? I go, I'm a 1%, and only 1% of people, fighters, make it to the UFC. And 1% of people have made it to where I'm at with fighting. And if you're telling me there's a 1% chance, then for me, that sounds pretty good because I've already overcome the 1% chance of doing what I did. So I'm willing to take this 1% chance to be able to come back and come back from this injury. And I go, has anybody ever done it before? And he goes, well, yeah. He goes, the only one is Peyton Manning came back, and I looked it up, and he won a Super Bowl after he had the same surgery I had. And I go, that's enough for me. Even if I didn't have that story, I would have still tried to do it. And long story short, a year and a half of physical therapy, every single day physical therapy with 80-year-old ladies in this little, office doing, basically arm bike and, doing like pulleys and stupid little thing, just coordination stuff after neck surgery. After a year and a half, I got cleared to fight and was able to come back. And
that's amazing.
I made a comeback and I won the biggest fight of my career. I was like a 5-1 underdog against Manny Bermudez and fought in my hometown in Boston, the Boston Garden where like the Celtics and the Bruins play. And I came back and won with the first round armbar submission. And man, the rest is,
And that's it. And you've never had a problem since. Like that's it. You took care of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, man. And like, I've had injuries along the way and things like that, but it's like, I feel like if I listen to what they told me to do, and like that's the thing is that everyone says it's not that simple, but it is that simple. Like it's something the guy Vinny Paz says. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Bleed for this, but they say sometimes like everybody will tell you what you can't do and what you're not supposed to do and what you can do. Sometimes if you just do the things that they tell you not to do, that you believe that you can do, you can be something great. And that's what the difference between a regular person like everybody else and somebody that's great is they're willing to do the things that normal people aren't willing to do, that they think are impossible. But I don't think anything's really impossible, because if I've been able to come from what I came from to become where I'm at, then I think that anybody, if they put the same amount of work and effort into it, they could be anything. They could be, and it's not just the fighting. Like I think this is not to be like, oh, I'm smart, but I think if I put this much effort, if I spend as much time as I did fighting, studying to be a doctor, I think I could be a doctor. It's just who's willing to put the time and the effort and the dedication and discipline into it. And that's kind of like what I feel like my best message is. It's like you can do anything you want to do if you put your mind to it. And that's not just me saying that, it's me living it and doing it.
That's the best way to wind the show down, what you just said.
Yeah.
I'm going to even say like what I've heard for the past hour is a story of mental toughness.
Yeah.
And so you are right that there are very few people who are willing to do the work and put the time in for anything. And that is why people stand out, whether it's in business or in sports. It's being uncommon. Being uncommon is uncommon. And wow, what a story, man!
Thanks, man. No, I appreciate it. No, yeah.
I got there's a few things that I wanted. So I've been taking notes the whole time, and you tell a really good story. Actually, you made this easy. I didn't even have to ask you a lot of questions, man. You just told the story perfectly. Something that kept coming up was learning, and in each thing you did, whether it was when you first started out at the gym or at the restaurant, you keep talking about learning, but not just for you learning, also teaching other people. That's a really common theme that's been in the past hour. Everything you've said, it's learning and teaching. And because I know you outside of the show, I do know that the way you're coming across, which is very humble, and your dad came on and he seems very humble. I don't know him, but
Yeah.
that's huge, because being that as humble as you are and all these lessons you've lived through, you've learned, and you're sharing, delivering that in a humble way is like the most powerful thing. It's just because it's not about you. It's about service to others. It's about helping other people.
Yeah.
And look, you're trying to do something, man, and you're doing it and you're achieving it. And that's about you, but you're in the process. I mean, when I first met you, man, when I first met you in the parking lot at the gym, right?
Yeah.
You would stand in your car, and I'm like, the gym we go to, there's a lot of guys like you. There's a lot of guys in the UFC there, and I'm just a dude that just goes there to work out with my physical therapist. I'm like, what is going on in this place?
Yeah.
So when I saw you out there, I think I turned to you and I'm like, hey, when's your next fight? We started talking. From that second, you've never been anything ever in any conversation other than just a normal, down to earth, humble dude. That is like a huge message right there. Like, I don't know if you have a big ego, but I've never sensed it.
Oh, no, I appreciate that, man. It means a lot.
Yeah.
That's something that I always feel like it's important. I think a lot of guys sometimes they get like to their head and they say, oh, like I did this, I did all this, but like at the end of the day, what's the point? Like at the end of the day, you're not going to be the champion forever. You're not going to be. So at the end of the day, what is the impact of the footprint you left on the
You
sport?
just said it.
Life. So that's it.
It's the impact. And so before we hit the record button, you asked me like, just to tell you a little bit about why we do this show. That's the answer.
Yeah.
This whole conversation, I hope, and I know you felt the same way, that we have an impact on somebody that's going to listen to it and watch it. And maybe they don't want to be a fighter, but it doesn't matter what they want to be. Your story, I mean, you talk about the mindset and the circumstances and the injuries and the things you've come through and the tragedy in your family, and like it goes on and on and on. I mean, your story is absolutely powerful. So that's impactful.
And the best thing too is like the messages I get. I feel like, I'd say that once every couple of days, and I get letters. I get letters too of people that, and I don't even know what's going on, but they're like, man, you've saved my life. I was gonna kill myself, and I watched your story, and I'm like, dude, like
really?
Even if you can save one person's life, or you can motivate one person maybe to get off their couch that is maybe feeling down to themselves, it's all worth it. If you can save even one person. So for me, that's kind of the way I look at it. Like you said, like if I can even make, like I said, you can't be the champion forever. This eventually everything ends, but it's how many people can you help along the way, and it's a chain reaction. Like for example, I helped Scrappy, for example, just one person. I helped him, let him stay at my house, live on my couch for a little bit, got him to the where he's at now, where he's obviously self-sustaining now, and he's one of the top guys unsigned by the UFC. But now he has somebody that he helped. He has a friend, Evan, who's 5 years younger than him. Evan Elder, I don't know if you've met him yet, but he just got signed to the UFC, man. This is all because, Scrappy brought him to Florida and played it forward. So then hopefully Evan helps somebody, and then it's a chain reaction, and everybody, one person can end up helping 100 people at the end of the day, and like maybe more, you know what I'm saying? So that's what it's all about.
Two more things I wanted to point out. When your dad came on earlier and he mentioned about luck, you have created so many opportunities for yourself, and nothing about it was luck. In fact, your entire story is hard work, perseverance, determination. Like your mental toughness is off the charts, right?
Yeah.
But also to compete where you compete, there's no other choice, right? So we could take you and drop you in any scenario and you're going to win. It doesn't have to be sports because you're so mentally tough. But there's nothing about that's luck. So wherever you go from here and you continue to win, or if you decide to do something, maybe you just become a coach, whatever you decide to do as you get older, that doesn't leave. It's really what you said. It's being able to pass it down. And the second point that's attached to that was everything I've heard you talk about was that you're coachable. In fact, you seek the coaching. You didn't. You probably cut the best onions around, but you spent time cutting onions in the beginning, right?
Yeah, dude.
But you're coachable. Like you don't think you know everything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It seems like you have an insatiable appetite for learning.
That's why I feel like a mixed martial artist is important. That's why I take pride. And I don't call myself a fighter. I call myself a mixed martial artist because it's different. Like I'm a fighter, and like in life, but to be a great fighter, you got to be a great mixed martial artist, and you have to be willing to be open and to learn. You're not gonna, one of the guys too is like George St. Pierre. He's a true version of like a real mixed martial artist, nicest, kindest guy you could ever meet, and he's continuously learning.
When do we get to see you holding the belt?
Oh man, I give
Come on.
it. Like,
when is it?
I'd say a year or two. I got to win these next couple fights. I got,
Right,
hopefully I'll be fighting again in January, and then hopefully get a fight. I don't know whether it'll be in Boston or Las Vegas, but man, it just takes a couple put together. I've already competed against, a couple of the guys in the top 5. I had some good fights against. I fought some of the best guys and, went toe to toe with them real close, but I know in any given day or the right opportunity, the right place and time that I can beat them. And, I know we talk about none of this is luck, but it's always sometimes it's good to have luck sometimes too. Sometimes you just get a good opportunity or something happens and, maybe somebody gets injured and they need someone to fill in. Like, this is the name of the game. But I think one of the things to be said about that is to always, take advantage of opportunities and be ready, because that's the thing people don't know. Because anytime an opportunity comes up and you're not ready for it, because maybe you're doing the wrong thing, you're out partying, the UFC call comes and you're like, oh, I can't. It's a missed opportunity, and all these missed opportunities, they add up. And if I wasn't ready when they called me in that 5 days, I might not have had any of this career.
Right.
So, but like I said, I made my own luck. If I wasn't ready for that, then I wasn't ready for that call, then I wouldn't be here now. Probably I'd be doing. I don't know what I'd be doing, but I think if you just always got to stay ready. There's a saying. I stay ready so I don't have to get ready, and that's what it is. That's why I live.
Listen, I want to thank you for doing this. It's you didn't disappoint. You told the story that I thought you were going to tell, the way that I was hoping you would tell it. And like, I hope that when this gets put out there and people start to watch it, that we start to see people making comments that we made an impact on people. For me, my job is just to bring people on that have great stories, but you living it and telling it, and I just hope that we help somebody, and people are
that's the goal. That's
inspire,
the goal.
motivate.
I want to, so.
And
man, you've helped me too. So like, that's the thing too, is like everything comes full circle. And I just feel like, it takes everybody, it takes like a whole village of people to make somebody great. Like, there's fighters that are coming up that, that really have nothing. Like, I let people stay in my house all the time and do things. And, I'm not a millionaire, so I can't give them a car. I can't give them this. I can try to buy them food sometimes, but I can't get their groceries every week.
You can make it. You can cook them a great meal.
I make it easier for them. So if you just give them a little bit, and then they can, play forward and bring it the whole way. So it's, it takes a lot of people to make somebody great, and a lot of people have helped me along the way. So I appreciate it, and you're one of them. So man, I appreciate you too, and I look forward to more endeavors in the future. And we're gonna, hopefully get that belt, and then when we get in that podcast, it'll really it'll be a good one with the belt behind me right here. That'll be
100%, man. All right, the last question: what is the best dish you know how to make?
Well, there's different types of dishes, because I think
pick one.
If I had to pick one, like if I had to eat one last meal, it sounds so simple and plain, but it's chicken parmesan. I love Italian food. I love that. I grew up as a kid rolling meatballs with my pops. He's always cooking, had a garden, fresh basil, tomatoes, all that stuff. So chicken parmesan is definitely my favorite dish to eat and to make. If I had to eat one last thing, it would be that. But as far as I think just for healthy food, since I'm a fighter when I'm in camp, I love making swordfish and pancit scallops stuff. That's my favorite. If I had to cook for a girl, you know what I'm saying, to get her over, I would make her that.
It's a whole different show.
Yeah, different show. So that's it, man. So
listen, I want to thank you again. And there's something that I'm so glad that it's easy to say on the show, and I say it at the end of every show, and I always hope that it's true. The people that are watching this, we want them to remember a few key takeaways. One, be humble, and Charles is. Hustle, and Charles does, and do the work. Those three things, you got to do them. And when you do them, there's no such thing as luck. There's going to be an outcome. And so we always end the show by talking about or sharing those three words. And if anybody wants to either follow you or get to know you, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, anybody, you guys can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that, Facebook, Charles Rosa MMA. You guys follow me on there. Send me a message if you have any questions. I'm always willing to help people. Also have a gym, American Combat Gym that, it's for all levels, not just UFC fighters or professional fighters. There's, girls, their first day coming, and there's kids classes. We have everything. So if anybody ever wants to, maybe, try it, whether it's to get in shape or whether you want to be UFC champion, we got all levels, and we got great coaches, and you guys are always welcome to come by. The first class is on me. Just tell them I sent you.
I love it. So all of that information is going to be down below. So if anybody, whoever just watched this, just look down below. You're going to see all that contact information. I follow him. He puts stuff out every day. It's pretty cool to watch what he's up to and where he's at and who he's helping. I've watched a lot of things lately where he's helping other people. He's at their events, brother and other people. It's pretty cool to watch. So listen, thanks again. There's gonna be a part 2 and a part 3.
All right.
There's gonna be more going on with you, man.
Let's run it. I'm always good.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. I'll see you tonight, brother.